Chapter 24. Ollie hit the leaf-strewn ground so hard the air popped from his lungs. He released the string of his bow as he fell, the arrow flying wildly into the branches above. For 3 heartbeats, Ollie lay on the flat of his back, watching the rays of sunlight weaving themselves between the treetops. His eyes traced the path of a dragonfly which whirred sporadically between the leaves drifting on the breeze. The ground felt soft, warm too. Everything in Ollie's life was cold and demanding. He didn't want to get up. What would really happen if he stayed here? He could lay unmoving and let all of his problems work themselves out. His sister, his mother, and the princess could all fend for themselves. They could find their own food, their own sacred powers, and whatever else they needed without him. He was tired. So tired. And he just wanted to... Ollie sucked in air involuntarily, as though he'd nearly been drowning. And with the air flooded back all the fear and anger that he had a moment before. The call had just tried to grab a hold of him, and that only fueled his anger more. He grabbed his knife as he twisted and squirmed in the vine's grasp. He wasn't going to let the call take him, and he'd be damned if these vines would hold him any longer. With every twist of his body, he could feel the resistance of the vines on his ankles and around both his shoulders. A particularly thorny one slithered in from the left towards Ollie's face, but he couldn't think of it now. Cries of pain and fear surrounded him, but Ollie couldn't think of them either. The vines nearly had him held fast. He'd screwed up, let down his guard, and if he didn't stay focused now, he'd be dead. Those vines would squeeze until his life popped from him like juice from a tomato. Ollie brought his knife up and sawed at the vines around his shoulder. He desperately tried not to think of how close that blade was to his own neck, nor about the slight tingling growing. Ollie brought his knife up and sawed at the vine around his shoulder. He desperately tried not to think of how close his blade was to his neck, nor about the slight tingling beginning to grow in his feet as the blood flow slowed. Time moved impossibly, as if everything both moved too fast and too slow, all at the same time. Beyond him, the world moved in a blur, a cacophony of sound and motion so fast and loud he could make out none of it. But here in this little world of blade sawing against vine, every single movement took an eternity. The fibers of the vines snapped as his blade worked, releasing small droplets of purplish lifeblood. He could see his own blood sliding up the vine's thorns, pulled from his body the way children drink with reed straws. It became a race to see who could bleed the other first. And then, with a final back and forth of his blade, the vine on Ollie's shoulder snapped apart. Ollie jerked upward as the pressure he'd been fighting against suddenly disappeared, but he wasn't free yet. He flipped the knife so that his other hand He flipped the knife to his other hand, working to cut the vine on his other shoulder. He had turned away from the thorny vine, working across the ground toward him. He had cut nearly halfway through the second vine when he felt the tingle of a vine on the back of his neck. Ollie gritted his teeth and worked faster, leaning away from it as best he could. The next vine snapped free, and Ollie jerked forward again, his still-moving blade cutting through his tunic and drawing blood. Oh, there was no time to care. He spun around and grabbed the vine, trying to work itself around his neck. Thorns bit into his finger, but Ollie gritted his teeth and thrust his blade into the fleshy skin, scraping the blade awkwardly to the side, leaving the vine cut open and pouring its blood onto the ground. He chucked it aside. Ollie cut the vines from his ankles in short order, grateful for the rush of feeling back into his toes as he stood. When he looked around, the group was in chaos. The princess lay on the ground a dozen feet away, squirming and thrashing in the leaves as Tal tried to get her blade in to chop the vines away. Fjord dangled upside down a few paces into the air, trying desperately to whack the vines at his ankle with his sword, even as it dragged him higher. Victor looked uncertain as he aimed his arrow toward the vine holding Fjord, bow drawn back, arms shaking. In fact, the only person who wasn't either trapped in vines or trying to help someone else get free was Arelda, who was sprinting toward Ollie. Her left shirt sleeve had ripped in a dozen places, but otherwise she seemed fine. "Are you all right?" she called, grabbing for his shoulder and yanking off bits of dead vine. Aye, Ollie brushed her hands away and grabbed his bow. But what in 12 hells are you doing here? He knocked an arrow, pulled back the string, and let it go a heartbeat later. The arrow flew straight through the vine, holding Fjord off the ground, and the man came stumbling down with a cry. Victor leaping backward out of the way. I had to come, Orelda said, following Ollie as he marched toward the princess. Oi, did you? He neared the princess. Vines had wrapped themselves around her ankles, knees, chests, and arms. All the thrashing and yelling hadn't gotten her anywhere, but more stuck. Her eyes didn't hold fear, though, but anger. She looked pissed, real pissed. So much so, Ollie didn't want to get involved. Woodsman, she screamed. Aye, he said. Get me out. Ollie grunted. Should probably let you die. Tal hacked away beside the princess, trying to chop away at the base of the vine wrapped around the princess's chest. She did her best to land each blow in the same place, as if to break open the vine the way she might chop up a felled tree. Ollie could let Tal go at it, getting nowhere while the crushing pressure of the vines sucked the princess's life away. He could take Orelda, and he could leave right now and never look back. He planned to, had every intention of it, but when he turned towards his mother, her eyes fixed on him. Help her, she said. She'd have killed you. She'd have killed you. Help her anyway. Orelda reached up and placed her palm on Ollie's cheek. She's desperate, Ollie. And don't we each do the dumbest of things when we're desperate? Go, help her. And then Orelda pulled her own knife free and made toward Victor as he tried to kick encroaching vines away from an unconscious-looking Fjord. Help her anyway. Ollie turned back to the princess. She was beautiful still, even covered in cuts, dirt, and nearly entombed in vines. But beautiful in a way that a thinly frozen lake might be. The moment you step on it, you get too close. You'll fall beneath the surface and die. Ollie growled and shook his head, but stomped over and grabbed Tal's hand as she reared back for another blow. Stop it! Ollie pushed her aside and knelt beside Leonie. He brought out his blade and looked the princess in the eye. For one split second, he thought about sliding it right through her iris. Instead, he muttered, "Stop squirming," and he got to work. Half a dozen careful slices later, the vine broke away. You cut it like rope, Tal said, dropping to the other side of the princess, sawing away at the nearest vine. Sure, Ollie said with a shrug, like magical death rope.